Imagine opening a map of the world and seeing no United States, no Canada, no Australia, no Latin America as we know it. Imagine a world where hundreds of indigenous kingdoms, tribes, and civilizations still controlled their ancestral lands. A world where English wasn't the global language. A world where some of today's most powerful countries might not even exist. Sound impossible? Well, today we're asking a fascinating question. What if colonization never happened? What would our world look like today? To answer that, we first need to understand how much colonization changed the planet. And trust me, the answer is bigger than you think. For most of human history, people stayed relatively close to where they were born. Different civilizations developed independently. Europeans lived in Europe. The Aztecs ruled parts of the Americas. Powerful kingdoms thrived across Africa. Asia was home to massive empires and trade networks. For thousands of years, these civilizations evolved separately. Then came the age of exploration. Beginning in the late 1400s, European nations started sailing farther than ever before. Portugal, Spain, Britain, France, the Netherlands. These countries established colonies across the globe. They claimed territories, extracted resources, spread their languages, spread their religions, and dramatically reshaped the world. Today, much of modern history is connected to colonization in one way or another. But what if that never happened? What if no civilization ever colonized another? Let's imagine a different timeline. In this world, long-distance ocean travel develops much more slowly. Ships remain smaller. Sea voyages remain dangerous. And crossing entire oceans becomes extremely difficult. As a result, European explorers never establish overseas colonies. The Americas remain largely isolated. Africa remains politically independent. Asia develops without foreign domination. Australia is never settled by outsiders. Trade still exists. People still travel. Cultures still interact. But nobody has the ability to conquer and permanently control distant continents. History now takes a very different path. The first major change happens in the Americas. Without European colonization, civilizations such as the Aztecs, Maya, and Inca continue to evolve. Instead of being conquered, they adapt, innovate, and expand. Hundreds of indigenous nations across North America continue developing their own governments, economies, and technologies. The continent becomes a patchwork of powerful native states. No United States, no Canada, no Mexico as we know them today. Instead, entirely different nations dominate the Western Hemisphere. But that's only the beginning. Africa experiences an even bigger transformation. Without colonial borders dividing the continent, African kingdoms develop according to their own political and cultural paths. Powerful trading states emerge. Regional empires rise and fall. Cities grow naturally around commerce and innovation rather than colonial administration. Many of today's political conflicts never emerge because many modern borders were never drawn by foreign powers. Meanwhile, Asia follows its own course. Countries such as China, India, Japan, Korea, and countless others continue evolving without foreign occupation or colonial rule. Some regions industrialize earlier, others industrialize later, but their development is driven largely by local priorities rather than outside control. At first glance, this world appears more independent, but that independence comes with consequences. Now, let's jump forward several centuries. One of the biggest differences is language. Today, English is spoken by billions of people, but in our alternate world, there is no global language. Instead, hundreds of major languages remain dominant. International communication becomes far more complicated. A businessman traveling between continents might need multiple translators just to negotiate a deal. Global cooperation becomes slower, but cultural diversity remains far greater. Then there's religion. Without colonization, major religions spread differently. Christianity remains influential in Europe. Islam continues growing through trade networks. Indigenous belief systems survive in many regions. The religious map of the world becomes far more diverse. And then comes technology. This is where things get interesting. Many people assume colonization accelerated technological progress. And in some ways it did. The exchange of crops, knowledge, resources, and ideas connected distant civilizations. Without colonization, that exchange happens much more slowly. Certain technologies take longer to spread. Scientific breakthroughs remain localized for decades, or even centuries. Industrial revolutions may happen later in some regions. But innovation doesn't stop. Humans are still curious. Inventors still invent. Scientists still discover. Progress simply follows different paths. Meanwhile, global trade looks completely different. Instead of a few dominant economic powers controlling massive international networks, trade becomes more regional. Local economies become stronger. Self-sufficiency becomes more important. Mass globalization develops much more slowly. And that changes everyday life. The clothes you wear, the food you eat, the technology you use. Everything becomes more local, more unique, and far less standardized. Fast forward to today. What does this world actually look like? First, the political map is almost unrecognizable. Thousands of indigenous nations still exist. Many modern countries never form. Others look completely different. The Americas contain dozens of powerful native civilizations. Africa consists of political entities that evolved naturally over centuries. Asia remains one of the world's largest centers of innovation and commerce. Australia is governed by societies that developed from its indigenous peoples. The cultural diversity is astonishing. Languages that disappeared in our timeline are thriving. Ancient traditions remain alive. Countless customs survive untouched. But there are challenges. International cooperation is harder. Global transportation networks are less developed. Economic growth is uneven. Large-scale scientific collaboration happens more slowly. The world is more diverse, but also more fragmented. And perhaps that's the biggest surprise. A world without colonization isn't automatically better, and it isn't automatically worse. It's simply different, very different. When people think about colonization, they often focus on what was gained or what was lost. But history is rarely that simple. Colonization reshaped borders, languages, religions, economies, cultures, and entire civilizations. Without it, humanity would still move forward. People would still innovate. Empires would still rise and fall. Trade would still connect distant societies. But the world we know today would be almost impossible to recognize. No familiar maps, no global English, no modern Americas as we know them, just a completely different version of human history. And that raises an even bigger question. If one event could change the world this dramatically, what other moments in history completely altered our future without us even realizing it? And if you could change one event in human history, which one would you choose? If you have watched this video until now, kindly give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you can be the first to see our next video. And drop in the comments, what alternate history should we explore next?